June 12th, 2008. That's the date the final chapter in the Metal Gear saga was released. Yeah, Metal Gear Solid 4 wasn't just another sequel, it was the end point of the entire franchise, and while it may not have been a perfect send-off, it thoroughly tied up every loose end of the entire series and answered every question and then some that any fan may have had, for better or worse. In short, it was a very worthy and dignified way to put this franchise to rest.
You lie!
Oh, that's right, I completely forgot about all those absolutely essential stories this series still had left to tell, as there was obviously so much more that could be done here. After all, it's not that Kojima-san himself was absolutely sick of Metal Gear at this point and already would have moved on to something else 3 times over, if not for the literal death threats he received for just considering that. No. He was absolutely desperate to complete this clearly unfinished saga. Okay, fine, I suppose you still could continue this franchise, but as you've already told us pretty much everything you possibly could tell us about this universe, what would any new game even be about? Well, as it turns out, we apparently still had plenty left to learn about the formative years of everyone's favourite hero turned villain, Big Boss. I suppose this was ultimately the only real choice, as there technically are a few possibilities there, but could they really provide us with anything of any real significance in terms of the franchise's overall storyline? Could the gameplay possibly be good enough to justify milking this series for at least a little longer? Well, let's just say there's a reason this video took me so atrociously long to make. Apart from my extreme laziness, I mean. Welcome back to my Metal Gear Retrospective. Set shortly after the events of Portable Ops, this game finds Snake, aka Big Boss, in Cuba, where he and his partner Kaz have set up Militaires Sans Frontières, or MSF, their new mercenary group. While training the troops one day, they are suddenly approached by Professor Galvez and one of his students named Paz. They want to hire MSF to help them deal with an armed insurgents in Costa Rica that is apparently being controlled by the CIA. As payment, Galvez offers MSF a new base of operations, which seems rather generous, but Snake is still hesitant to accept as he doubts this professor is telling them the whole story.
What do they call you back at Center?
Well then, allow me to get straight to the point. Central America is the navel of the American continents, bridging north and south. We want this land. In preparation, we've begun instigating anti-Somoza sentiment and providing aid to the Sandinista National Liberation Front.
You're manipulating Sandinista into overthrowing Somoza for you.
You think America's just gonna let that happen?
Certainly not. After all, the CIA is already here, but it's more complex than that. The CIA's got something else planned as well.
What?
That is the million-dollar question. Big Boss, we want you and your unit to find the answer.
While this all certainly confirms Snake's suspicions, neither he nor Kaz are exactly eager to get involved in a territory dispute between the CIA and KGB. They also question Paz's presence, as she was seemingly just brought along to garner sympathy, but it seems there is a bit more to her than that. Galvez explains that Paz and one of her friends were actually captured and held against their will by the CIA after accidentally stumbling on one of their facilities. Paz somehow managed to escape, and while she couldn't help her friend, she did manage to get a hold of an audio cassette tape she apparently recorded before they were captured. Claiming this tape is why the girls were captured, as it supposedly contained something the CIA did not want them nor anyone else to hear, Galvez starts playing it using a portable cassette player. At first, all that can be heard is a bunch of bird noises, as that's what Paz's friend was researching, but then suddenly...
Poisonous. I need to get rid of it. I chase it back to its nest. You can't. The snake's too vicious. It's all... many people. I chase it away. It will bite you unless you kill it. Go home.
Boss. Voice print analysis confirms that this voice is indeed that of the legendary hero and criminal, the Boss.
What?
That's right, it seems the Boss, Snake's old mentor that he himself was forced to kill at the end of MGS3, might somehow still be alive, or at least that's what this tape seems to indicate. While Snake is clearly distressed by this, Kaz is certain this has to be some sort of setup. When Galvez threatens to burn the tape as they no longer have any need of it though, Snake quickly snaps it out of his hands and accepts the mission after all.
I'll do it for the girl. For Paz.
Sure, Snake, Paz is the one you're doing this for. Keep telling yourself that. Before we move on, you may have noticed that this game bears a rather striking resemblance to the franchise's previous handheld entry, Portable Ops, especially when it comes to their visuals. They both utilize these very high quality comic book-like cutscenes with a pretty distinct art style that I for one certainly don't mind at all. In fact, I'd say they only help make both games stand out that much more. This time around though, they're even more detailed and animated, and they also include a few moments of slight interactivity. Yeah, unlike the cutscenes in Portable Ops, they aren't completely static this time around. Occasionally, they will either allow you to look around and zoom in on various details to potentially discover various hidden secrets, or you'll get to enjoy a short QuickTime event. No, it's nothing all that impressive, in fact it can actually get somewhat annoying and obtrusive, but it is overall a decent little addition. For the most part. Maybe. Either way, I certainly don't mind this style of cutscene, but much like with Portable Ops, it is a bit jarring that only the cutscenes are done in this style. At the very least, it only helps increase the gap between the gameplay and the story, which isn't necessarily told all that brilliantly in the first place. Sure, the cutscenes are decent enough, and things certainly aren't too complex to follow or anything, but so much of the information relayed here are only done so through a frankly ludicrous amount of so-called briefing files. You see, unlike the previous titles in this franchise, you don't really get any sort of radio or codec to speak of this time. Instead, your only real source of information are these audio tapes that are only accessible within a dedicated submenu before each mission. While a few of these do contain some fairly useful and or rather amusing tidbits though, there are just way too many of them, they can't be sorted in anything other than the default not all that helpful order, and they're all far too long-winded, boring, and or utterly pointless. I mean, is there really any good reason for anyone involved to record a conversation about who the hottest chick on base is or where the best coffee comes from? Hell, some of the tapes are even more pointless than that, as the only information they provide is that they can't provide any information.
I have no advice on dealing with El Basilisco's attacks.
What do I need to do?
To tell you the truth, I don't really know!
The briefing files aren't the only problem with the storytelling here though, far from it. Remember how I said that you access these files in a menu before each mission? Yeah, that's definitely part of the problem here, the fact that the game is mission-based. I know, this is just a way to cater to shorter sessions on the go, as well as the more multiplayer-focused nature of the game, but I'm sorry, it absolutely destroys the game's story structure and sense of progression. Just think about it. The story here is literally cut up into tiny pieces, which would be bad enough, but those pieces aren't even cut up properly. The action is consistently interrupted at the most awkward and nonsensical moments, leading to very few, if any, natural pauses. I mean, just look at what happens every single time you're about to have a bigger battle. Yeah, that actually just happened. They seriously pulled the to be continued card, and like I said, this happens before every single one of these fights. Sure, this does give you the opportunity to re-equip yourself properly for the ensuing battle, but it's not exactly subtle, is it? It just sends everything to such a screeching halt that it almost ends up being comical. Almost. The main missions aren't the only thing you have to worry about either. You see, between each mission, you also have to take care of your base and its various squads. This is fairly similar to the system in Portable Ops, though it is, if anything, a bit more streamlined here. It's also quite a bit more involved though, so it's still a massive and ultimately rather tedious chore. Much like with Portable Ops, you can capture and recruit enemy soldiers in order to develop new items and equipment, get more intel before missions, and or take on various off-screen missions, also called Outer Ops. You can also use these soldiers in various multiplayer or so-called extra ops missions, though that's not necessarily all that useful. What is useful is recruiting as many soldiers as you can, considering they all have various strengths and weaknesses. Some increase the rate and quality of the equipment being developed, some make injured soldiers heal faster, and some are basically just cannon fodder. While this does make it somewhat worthwhile going after every soldier you see, it also means you'll be spending quite a bit of time fiddling around in these menus. In fact, it's what takes up the most time in this entire game. I'm not kidding, the time spent in actual missions is only a fraction of the time spent managing your base and teams. Sure, it's a good thing that they made sorting your troops a lot more convenient than in Portable Ops, and most of this is technically optional, but the balance between actual gameplay and menu management is still way off, and it only makes things much more tedious and drawn out. The same could also be said about the abundance of so-called extra ops. These are essentially a bunch of semi-optional side missions, and while some of them are decently entertaining, most of them are either boring as hell or completely pointless. Well, I say they're pointless, but as they can provide you with more recruits, items and or equipment, you do feel sort of coerced into doing at least a fair few of them. Hell, you're all but forced to do some of them eventually, but I'll get into that a bit later. For now though, let's just get back to Snake, who upon arriving in Costa Rica, discovers that the CIA are seemingly bringing nukes into the region. In order to confirm this and stop them if true, he is instructed to find the Sandinistas, a rebel army secretly aided by the KGB, and get their help to track down this cargo. After rescuing a group of them from a prison camp, Snake is introduced to Amanda, their current leader, and her kid brother Chico. Before they can exchange that much info though, they're suddenly attacked by...
El Colibri!
Desperate to save Chico, Amanda quickly chases after him, only to end up captured herself. Unlike with Chico though, Snake is able to shoot her free, but this unfortunately also results in her breaking her leg. Once the flying machines are gone, Snake convinces Amanda to join MSF and heal up at their base after assuring her that he'll rescue Chico as well. Following Amanda's directions to an enemy prison camp, Snake eventually finds the cell where Chico is being held. Before taking him to safety though, Snake asks Chico about the CIA cargo and is informed that it has most likely been brought to a nearby train station. From there it will be brought into the mountains using a tunnel, but where or what this tunnel leads to nobody seems to know. You see, according to Chico, the area is protected by a spirit.
Spirit?
No, really, I saw it! I was camping up there one day, and just as I was waking up around dawn, I heard this loud noise. I opened my eyes and saw an enormous shadow. Must have been 30 bara at least. He was walking, on legs as big as trees.
Where did you see it?
At the terminal near the tunnel, but I only saw it that one time.
Wait, if you saw the thing, why do you still think it's a spirit? I mean, based on the description, it sounds quite a bit more like some sort of machine or vehicle, doesn't it? What, do you also think armored trucks are like dragons or something? In any case, after getting this info, Snake offers to bring Chico back to base, but he's rather reluctant to accept. It turns out he broke down under torture and told his captors where to find the Sandinistas, and he feels too ashamed to face them again. In fact, he feels so bad he claims he just wants to die, a request Snake actually seems rather willing to grant him.
Any last words? I just wasted a bullet. Don't waste your life. Listen to me, Chico. You died here today. You understand? You're hombre nuevo. A new man. Now, give that new life to me.
Yeah, that wasn't overly dramatic or anything. Seriously, Snake, was any of that really necessary? Did you really have to scare the piss out of and possibly scar this kid for life just because he said he wanted to die? Of course he didn't really mean that. He's just a dumbass little twerp who's in way over his head. How exactly is shoving a pistol in his face going to help him, you nutball? We'll continue the story in a bit, but I think this is as good a time as any to go over how the game actually plays. As previously mentioned, this game is split up into a bunch of relatively short missions that usually involve getting from point A to point B without being spotted, possibly while trying to find some item and or a particular person or the like. Essentially, it's much the same thing as you've seen in the previous games. There are a few things that make it a bit different this time around though, and I don't just mean the mission-based structure of it all. For example, the ability to recruit enemy soldiers does, as already stated, return from portable ops, but it's much more convenient this time around. Instead of having to drag enemies to specific spots on the map and call for an extraction, you now just use so-called Fulton recovery balloons to have them airlifted away from wherever they are, even if they're indoors and should technically just slam against the ceiling. While this does work much better than the drag and drop thing in PO though, it does have one little problem. It completely breaks the game. No, really, as convenient as this system is, it totally removes any sense of challenge, as you just end up tranking and airlifting out every single enemy you come across, leaving you with no other obstacle for the rest of the mission. Okay, so there will occasionally be a few more soldiers than you have Fultons, at least at first, but most of the time you just won't face much, if any, resistance. Hell, even potential reinforcements can easily be captured, meaning they're usually more helpful than they are a hindrance. It's completely backwards. As if that's not bad enough, things only get easier once you unlock the so-called sneaking suit. You see, this game still has a camo system of sorts, though it's far less involved than before. As a matter of fact, your camo index is all but pointless here, as any potential effects on it are negligible at best. No, the only real difference between the various outfits are in their carrying capacities, meaning some may allow you to bring an extra weapon or two, potentially at the cost of one less item or something. Additionally, a select few outfits may also have some special benefits, which is where the sneaking suit comes in. The thing is that while it is incredibly easy to deal with and recruit the enemy soldiers, the fact that you never really get that good of a camouflage does mean that they can still spot and or hear you. Once you get the sneaking suit though, they may still be able to spot you, but as long as you stay out of their line of sight, you can run right up to them and take them out, as they will no longer be able to hear you. Yep, the sneaking suit actually removes any noise you make while moving, effectively erasing any last shred of challenge most missions may have had left. No, you don't have to use it, and yes, there are some slightly more challenging missions, but this still makes the game overall way too easy and that much more of a tedious trudge. It just gets really dull really fast, and I'm sorry, any semblance of stealth has been completely taken out of the equation. Honestly, it barely feels like a Metal Gear game at all. That's certainly true of the so-called outer ops. These are essentially just a bunch of off-screen missions you can send any recruited enemies on in order to gain various equipment, items, and or even more recruits. They can also increase your base and soldiers' rank and levels, so they can be relatively useful. Unfortunately, they're also insanely dull, time-consuming, and uninvolved. This really is just a bunch of boring menus without any semblance of interactivity. The closest thing to action in these missions is when they're completed and you get the option of watching a so-called battle log, essentially a simplified replay of how the battle went. Okay, maybe that doesn't sound too bad, but just take a look at this and then tell me it's the best solution they could have possibly come up with. I know, truly awe-inspiring, isn't it? Fair enough, this is all entirely optional, but much like the extra ops, you just feel like you're missing out if you don't do at least a fair few of them, even if they are painfully uninteresting. In-game weapon and item management can also be a bit of a pain. Sure, they do intend for and allow you to check and select your equipment before each individual mission, which I suppose makes for a slightly more strategic experience, but it's just not that good in practice. In fact, it can and will create a few rather annoying and or downright ruinous problems. For one thing, you may occasionally need, or at least be far better off with a certain weapon or item, but as you usually don't know exactly what the mission will entail in advance, you can easily find yourself stuck in a mission without a decent loadout. Yes, you are usually told if a mission is impossible without a specific item, but the fact that completely exiting the mission is the only way to change your equipment if you make a mistake or forget something is still way less than ideal. I suppose it is good that you're at least allowed a few more items per mission than in Portable Ops, but that doesn't help much when changing gear can potentially get you killed. You see, the game doesn't actually pause whenever you bring up the in-game weapon or item menus, meaning you're completely exposed and unable to move while accessing them. No, this isn't always a problem, but not being able to switch weapons during a hectic battle without being riddled with bullets doesn't exactly seem fair, does it? As for how the game controls, that actually depends on a few things. You see, I've been using the HD remastered version for this video, but as you might have guessed, that's not the original version. If you wanted to play this game when it was first released, you had to pick it up on the PSP. For the most part though, the differences between these versions are relatively negligible, but the controls are a bit of a different story. The thing is that the HD remasters have quite a huge advantage over the original PSP version in that they support dual analogs. The PSP only had one joystick, so it obviously had to sort out its control scheme in a rather different way, and while it was somewhat improved from Portable Ops from what I remember, it still wasn't exactly spectacular. With dual analogs though, it's perfectly fine, but if you want to take the game on the go, you will have to deal with an inferior and more cumbersome control scheme. Either way, after following Chico and Amanda's directions, Snake does indeed find the CIA cargo at the aforementioned train station. Unfortunately, he's only able to watch some trucks drive it away through a tunnel before a tank shows up and blocks said tunnel by blasting a train car into it. After taking out this tank and its backup crew, Snake acts on a tip from Chico and finds an alternate route to the mountains by blowing up a wall back in the prison camp. Using this new path, Snake eventually relocates the cargo trucks, leading to a bit of a neat sequence where you actually have to pick out the correct one based on its number plate. You see, when the trucks took off from the train station, Snake got a quick glimpse of the number plate of the truck carrying the actual nukes, meaning you now have to remember and pick that number. At least, that's what you're led to believe. Oh, you thought picking the wrong truck might get you captured or trigger an alarm or something? You actually thought it might have some sort of consequence? Silly goose, of course it doesn't. No, in fact, you can't really make a wrong choice, as the other trucks only contain various Easter eggs. For example, one truck is apparently a bit too dark. Sunlight! Another contains the literal version of this franchise's namesake,
Metal Gear.
And one even contains the creator of this universe himself,
Mr. Kojima.
Now, all of this is basically just a bit of fun, as it doesn't really make much of a difference, but that's exactly my point. Why even bother pointing out that specific number plate if it doesn't actually matter at all if you get it wrong? Hell, finding Kojima even results in him becoming a new recruit, so yeah, you're literally rewarded for making a mistake. In any case, the nukes have already been unloaded, and before he has a chance to chase them down, Snake also comes across a wheelchair-bound scientist arguing with some bald executive or government official. They appear to be arguing about the proper use of their nukes, as the bald man, apparently called Hot Coldman, seemingly intends to launch one in order to prove the theory of nuclear deterrence. On the other hand, the scientist, named Huey, feels this would be a grossly unconscionable and completely unnecessary act, as the whole idea of deterrence is supposed to be that no one ever actually uses their nukes for fear of mutually assured destruction. This is actually a topic the game constantly brings up, by the way, the concept, benefits and drawbacks of so-called nuclear deterrence. While I get that this is something fairly intrinsic to this particular storyline and setting, I don't think it was really necessary to go over every minute little detail of all the tiniest aspects of this theory every single time someone even thinks about mentioning nukes in any way, shape or form. They seriously treat the players like complete morons, as I swear the exact same lines on the subject are repeated over and over and over again. It's damn near comical.
The whole concept of nuclear deterrence is entirely hypothetical to begin with.
Unless we prove we're capable of launching, Peace Walker is useless as a deterrent.
Thanks to deterrence, we haven't had a world war since 1945.
You told me it was going to be a deterrent, that we wouldn't have to launch.
And as a result of all that, we now have mutually assured destruction.
It's the ultimate form of deterrence.
Deterrent. Deterrent. Deterrent.
Deterrent? Prove that his perfect deterrent works?
Either way, Coleman isn't willing to listen to any of Huey's pleas as he pushes him down the nearby stairs before taking off to prepare his launch. After making sure Huey is okay, Snake rushes after Coleman, only to see him fly off in a helicopter, also hauling away some huge bipedal machine with a butterfly painted dome. Just as they leave Snake's sight though, another huge machine comes barreling towards him as, with a bit of help from Huey, he is forced to take down the first of several AI weapons. You see, in this game, you don't really get any bosses a la the Foxhound unit or the Cobras, as you instead will have to deal with a series of unmanned AI tanks. This might seem a bit of a shame at first, but it turns out that these battles are actually pretty damn great. Oh, the fact that Snake is now able to single-handedly take on several of these behemoths with relative ease, when just one such thing required multiple confrontations with assistance in a previous game, definitely makes both them and this game's Metal Gear seem like much less of a threat, but these sorts of battles were usually among the highlights in earlier titles, so getting more of them isn't really a bad thing. While all of these weapons do have their own unique look, attack patterns and defenses, meaning each of them technically requires slightly different tactics, they do all consist of the same basic idea. Damage the machine enough until it stalls and goes into a critical error/reboot mode, use the resulting opportunity to bust open and climb into its AI pod, and finish it off by ripping out its data boards. Like I said, every machine does require slightly different tactics in order to gain access to the AI pod, and there are plenty of options as to how exactly you go about damaging them, but yeah, they all require these same basic steps. All in all, these battles are easily the best part of the game, but they're certainly not perfect. For one thing, they are a bit too easy to deal with, and for another, there just aren't enough of them. I mean, most Metal Gear games tend to have anywhere from 5 to 10 or more boss battles, depending a bit on what you classify as such, but here you really only get 4, including the final Metal Gear fight. Sure, they're quite different kinds of boss battles, but it still seems a bit lacking, doesn't it? While you don't really get any other proper boss battles though, I suppose the various tank, armored vehicle and helicopter battles like the ones mentioned earlier can be considered mini-bosses. Unfortunately, these battles are easily among the worst parts of the game, or at least they can be. Sure, getting to keep whatever vehicle is involved if you manage to stop it and its entourage without destroying it is a rather neat idea, but as they're only ever used for outer ops, it just doesn't seem worth having to go through these excruciatingly long-winded and ludicrously structured battles. Essentially, these fights pit you against a battalion of soldiers and some sort of armed and armored vehicle. As you always start off out of sight of the enemies, you can decide for yourself whether to go in guns blazing or try for a more stealthy approach, but every enemy has to be taken out in one way or another in order to proceed, including the Captain Commander Leader, who only shows up once everyone else is gone. Sounds reasonable enough, I suppose, but it's far, far from that simple. You see, it turns out that you'll have to deal with several batches of reinforcements no matter what you do, so being stealthy might actually be a drawback, considering reinforcements show up much faster when you just start shooting shit, or at least they seem to. Yeah, you might have to deal with a few more soldiers overall with that approach, and supposedly it takes longer for the commander to pop his head out in that situation, but in my experience, it hardly seems to matter. It's not like going stealthy is always all that feasible anyway. It seems to be ridiculously easy to get spotted in these fights, and once you have, there's usually next to nothing you can do to get back in hiding. All of this means that you're usually forced to deal with an insane, downright unfair amount of reinforcements, and even if you weren't trying to recover the vehicle at the end, most of these battles can easily require more than one supply drop, as you just won't have enough ammo or healing items to deal with everything. In addition, that sock-cucking, muck-fothering, Allen-sifting, fitch-basing turd of a leader always seems to take 24 donkey's ages to actually turn up, meaning you can easily spend 20 to 40 minutes or more on just one of these absolute piles of dung. In other words, I don't like them. Anyway, once the so-called pupa has been dealt with, Huey explains to Snake that the machine he just fought was part of a series of unmanned AI-controlled weapons he himself helped develop. While these machines are quite a threat though, they're nothing compared to his crowning achievement named Peace Walker, the machine Snake saw Coldman hauling away. As it turns out, Peace Walker is a nuclear-equipped bipedal AI weapon intended to serve as the ultimate form of deterrence. Unlike with regular nukes, Peace Walker makes retaliation an absolute guarantee, as no humans are involved in the decision-making process, only its highly advanced artificial brain.
It chooses the appropriate target and launches a retaliatory nuclear strike, every time, without needing human input to make the call. Launching a nuclear strike against Peace Walker is tantamount to pushing the launch button against yourself. What Coldman is saying is that to achieve this goal, we need to demonstrate that retaliation will be carried out by a machine. He will launch his nuke.
While all of this makes Peace Walker quite a formidable weapon, and Coldman's launch could spell global disaster, it luckily isn't quite finished yet. Huey explains that it still needs to be fitted with its brain, which is currently being developed by a Dr. Strangelove in her lab in some nearby ruins. After recruiting and transporting Huey to Mother Base, Snake proceeds to said lab, and after first taking care of the helicopter gunship and its crew near a waterfall, he suddenly runs into a half-naked, exhausted and clearly distressed woman. Once Snake calms her down, she identifies herself as Cecile and explains that she's an ornithologist who just escaped from a nearby facility. Apparently she was researching and recording various birds and bird noises when she accidentally stumbled upon a secret lab and got captured. It also turns out that what she recorded is already rather familiar to Snake.
I trace it away. It will bite you unless you kill it. Go home.
You're the one who made the tape.
Indeed she is, Snake, and apart from Dr. Strangelove, who is more of a foe for the most part anyway, she is also the last supporting character to be added to this game's roster. As a result, what we have here has to be the most useless and uninteresting collection of ditwits of any Metal Gear game so far, if not any game in general. Seriously, most of them contribute next to nothing of value, they're all a bunch of stereotyped retreads and references, and the names... Are you kidding me with these names? Fine, so Huey, Kaz and Amanda are fair enough, but you really couldn't come up with a better name for your somewhat eccentric and morally ambiguous scientist than Dr. Strangelove? Seriously? Cecile's not that much better either, as she's nothing but a vacuous attempt at eye candy, which definitely works when you can barely see the character most of the time anyway, and as it turns out, her name is actually just a pun.
Cecile Cosima Caminades. It sounds almost like the sentence, Kojima Caminandes. Kami is the word for God in Japanese. Nandesu, well, it's hard to explain, but placed after God, it would turn the sentence into, is God. Kojima is God. Cecile's name is a message. I don't believe it. Kojima is God. Kojima is God.
Yeah, this bint is literally nothing but a joke. Fan-titting-tastic. Let's be honest though, Cecile could be named Bimbo McSlutpants and speaking nothing but sexual innuendo, and she would still be taken more seriously than Hot Coldman. How in the name of nuclear annihilation did this ever get past an initial brainstorming session? Who the poop heard that name and went, brilliant! We couldn't possibly come up with anything better than that. It's just perfect. I mean, Hot Coldman? You might as well just call him Kill McEvil, Bill Lane, or Die Hardman. It's just too stupid. Even disregarding the laughably bad names though, these characters are still really awful. They're just so boring and bear so little relevance to the overall proceedings that they honestly may as well not be here. I mean, Chico's just an annoying twat spouting mostly useless cryptozoology nonsense, Cecile barely has any info at all, and Amanda spends the entire game being injured. Yeah, they literally take the one character that might have been slightly interesting completely out of the equation for pretty much the entire game. It's damn near insulting. As for Kaz, I suppose he's okay, but his introduction definitely isn't. Sure, if you've played the other games in the series, it shouldn't take you too long to realize that this is McDonnell Miller, the guy Liquid impersonated in MGS1, but here he just shows up at the start of the game with the new moniker of Cars, and we're seemingly just supposed to know who he is and where he came from. Yeah, I know, all the info you need can be found within the briefing files, but how about you just introduce the damn character, you lazy halfwits? Meanwhile, back in Storyland, Cecile informs Snake that from what she could gather while tied up and blindfolded, Strangelove's lab was all but abandoned. In fact, the only people she could sense was the good doctor herself and some other unseen woman. While the two of them apparently talked quite a bit, Cecile didn't catch much of their conversations, but she did hear the other woman singing on occasion. When she was making her escape though, she did get a bit of a look at the lab itself and what it contained.
Lots of machinery. A big computer, like you would see in a university.
What about the room where you heard the voice? Anybody in there?
I don't know. There was a tube. A large tube in the back. When I approached it, I heard a voice.
What did it say?
Jack.
Jack.
As he can't really do all that much with this information for now though, Snake convinces Cecile to join his ranks and continues towards the lab after having her extracted. Unfortunately, he encounters yet another hurdle once he arrives there, as the ID card Huey gave him doesn't actually grant him access after all. This doesn't really make any sense, and is clearly just a way to needlessly pad out the game with a bit more nonsense, but at least it's blatant? With a bit of help from Cecile though, Snake quickly finds another ID card by tracking down one of her captors. Heading back to the lab, Snake finally gains access, but is immediately confronted by Dr. Strangelove herself. Rather than attack Snake or sending guards after him though, Strangelove instead just wants him to tell her the truth regarding the boss's final mission, as she doesn't buy the official story at all. Not willing to cooperate though, Snake claims ignorance over any further information, much to Strangelove's chagrin. It seems she was rather prepared for this eventuality though, as she still has one last ace up her sleeve.
Would you like to meet her?
The boss is gone.
You took her life. I gave it back. This is my baby, my morpho butterfly. It's neither pupa nor cocoon, but an Amar girl. A complete individual in the fullest sense of the word. Is someone there?
Boss. Is that you?
I call it the mammal pod.
That's right, Strangelove has made a machine with the literal mind and voice of the boss. Now, I know we're not really supposed to think too much about this, but I just find it distracting. I mean, how exactly did Strangelove create a perfect replication of her voice? From samples? If so, where did they come from? All of Peace Walker's data is seemingly based primarily on rather classified and heavily limited and or redacted mission files and the like, so again, where are the voice samples coming from? Even if I disregard how this voice was made though, I still have to wonder why. Did this thing really need any sort of voice, and if so, why did it have to be this specific one? Maybe it was meant to be some sort of tribute, but if you wanted a way to honor the memory of your former love, I really don't think making her the voice of your nuclear-equipped bipedal death machine was the best way you could have done that. In any case, upon detecting and seemingly recognizing Snake by name, the pod opens up and allows Snake to root around in its components, something Strangelove is more than willing to just let happen. In fact, she seems to actively want him to do this.
Complete your mission, Snake. Extinguish that noble soul once again, if you can.
Yeah, giving Snake completely free and unsupervised access to the most valuable and vulnerable part of this entire operation is a great idea, because you can watch him destroy your work? Seriously, what was the plan here? Big surprise, Snake does indeed attempt to destroy the pod, and when the AI eventually starts breaking down, he seemingly passes out as Strangelove shuts everything down and has him thrown out. Once he regains consciousness, Snake has just enough time to witness the mammal pod being hauled away before the flying AI machine known as the Chrysalis shows up and our second AI battle ensues. After swatting this annoying fly, Snake heads to a secret assembly facility hidden away in an abandoned quarry/dig site, as that's apparently where Peace Walker is being fitted with the mammal pod. While Snake manages to push his way through a fairly substantial number of soldiers and flying platforms guarding the entrance to this facility though, it seems he still has to get past one more obstacle before gaining access. okay, I have so many problems with this. How in Satan's laundry does this thing, this gigantic behemoth, even get the opportunity to essentially sneak up on Snake? You're honestly going to tell me he couldn't hear or feel it coming? That would be a stretch even with a tractor, let alone this office building of a machine. Besides which, it's not like it's exactly racing at him at the speed of light, so Snake could easily, and I mean embarrassingly easily, just slip into the facility before this thing could even sense his presence. Hell, even when it's right next to him, it's so big and slow that getting past it would be the easiest thing in the world. There's absolutely no need for him to engage in combat whatsoever. Nevertheless, that's exactly what he does, but as this is one of, if not the easiest battle in the entire game, it really doesn't take all that long. Snake then infiltrates the assembly facility, relocates the mammal pod, and approaches it once Strangelove, Coldman, and the guards leave the area. Instead of using this opportunity to just blast the thing to dust though, Snake decides the better option is to waste time asking it the true intent behind the boss's final mission. Naturally, this results in him getting captured, and while Coldman is seemingly prepared to kill Snake then and there, Strangelove stops him as she claims he has information vital to the completion of the mammal pod. After having Snake taken away and chained up, Strangelove, desperate to have him admit the truth about the boss, starts torturing him using some sort of electrified batons. Yeah, haven't seen anything like that before, have we? Despite Strangelove's best efforts though, Snake still claims the official story is the only one, which I always found a bit strange. I mean, as far as I know, the whole reason he left in the first place was because he felt the powers that be had exploited and betrayed the boss just to save their own asses, so it's not like he'd feel especially inclined to toe the company line, as it were. I suppose he might feel like revealing the truth would dishonor the boss's last wishes or something, and it's not like it would really make sense for him to give the bad guys exactly what they want, but I do find myself kind of asking the same questions as Strangelove.
Why won't you tell me? You're no longer one of Washington's lapdogs. You have no moral obligation to your country.
That woman was a traitor.
Why? For what purpose?
She went to her grave, cursing her country.
Why? Who is it? What are you protecting?
Once back in his cell, Snake uses a wire hidden in his chest scar to cut open the lock, make his escape, and catch up to Peace Walker, Strangelove, and Coldman. Unfortunately, it seems Coldman has managed to find and capture Paz while Snake was in captivity, as he takes her with him as a hostage while preparing to launch his nuke. He also reveals that he's decided to make Mother Base the target for his launch as he and Strangelove leave to prepare Peace Walker for deployment. Snake does his best to chase after and stop them, even going so far as to fire at Peace Walker in sheer desperation, which might have been an even worse idea than you think.
What? What did I do?
Self-defense system online.
Snake, the pod's outfitted with a self-defense module. Upon detecting attack, it aborts its command and enters small target suppression mode. Right now, Peace Walker's highest priority target is you! Here it comes!
Whoopsie daisy.
Actually, this turns out not to be such a big deal after all, as Snake manages to stand his ground against Peace Walker quite successfully. Unfortunately, he's unable to finish it off as Coldman suddenly appears in a helicopter and fires at Peace Walker in order to get it to follow him again. Getting chased on a horse, Snake does his best to keep up with them, but after a steep hill proves to be a bit too treacherous, Coldman and Peace Walker ultimately escape across the border. Making his way to a nearby control tower where it's believed Peace Walker is being finalized, Snake first has to fight his way through a horde of enemy soldiers as well as an attack helicopter before once again coming face to face with Coldman. Unfortunately, he informs Snake that he's too late as the final data has already been uploaded to the mammal pod, but before he can hit the launch switch, another familiar face suddenly turns up.
Stand down, big boss. You backstabbing son of a...
Backstabbing? Correct me if I'm wrong, but were we not enemies all along?
What are you going to do?
Launch a nuke. Target Cuba.
Have you lost your mind? What would you possibly gain?
We won't be the ones launching it. You, the Americans, will attack our ally, Cuba.
What?
Yup, it turns out Galvez is actually a KGB spy named Sodornov who faked an allegiance with Coldman in order to get his hands on Peace Walker and use it against the US. As they will be launching from an American base, Sodornov believes this will make the world think the US launched an attack against their own people, causing anti-American and communist sentiment to spread throughout the world. Not certain things would actually be quite that simple, but sure, let's just go with it. Either way, Coldman is understandably rather unwilling to participate in such a scheme, but after attempting and failing to get Paz to shoot him, Sodornov decides to just do so himself. Zadornov doesn't actually kill Coldman though, as he still needs him to enter the launch code. Just as he's about to kill Snake, however, he's interrupted by even more party crashers.
Freeze! You're a regular Joan of Arc.
Nonsense. You're the hero here.
You saved my life. You're the heroes here.
No kidding. If not for Amanda and her team, Snake would be dead and the entire world would be effed. Good on them and all, but it still feels like a massive cop-out to have a character be all but useless for the entire game, only to have them swoop in at the end to save the day. Not that they had that many other options though, because they clearly wrote themselves into a very tiny corner here. As it happens though, things aren't quite over yet. You see, Coldman still has the launch device attached to his wrist, and while he, Paz, and Zadornov are being transported to Mother Base, this stupid shit happens.
We got big problems, Snake. Coldman's activated the nuclear launch switch.
It started transmitting the false data set to NORAD.
There's no way to tell the difference between false data and the real thing on a radar screen. They'll think it's a real Soviet attack.
This could get ugly. Unless we stop it, we're looking at a retaliatory chain reaction.
Okay, serious question. Why did Coldman still have the launch device? You're telling me no one could pick the handcuffs or find some bolt cutters or something? Also, even if removing it was impossible, why didn't anyone so much as attempt to stop him entering the code? I mean, it's not like he's being subtle or quick about it, so why are you just sitting there staring at him? Just grab his hand, you dingleberries! As it happens though, Coldman isn't too worried, as he doesn't believe the US are actually willing to retaliate. The others aren't quite as certain, so they decide to hack into NORAD's feed in order to monitor them, and unfortunately, things don't look very good. It seems the false launch data has indeed fooled NORAD, and even if they decide not to retaliate, Peace Walker definitely will. Seeing no other option, Snake therefore decides to attempt to stop at least one potential launch by destroying Peace Walker. While he does manage to stand his ground quite successfully though, eventually even damaging Peace Walker enough to stop it from actually launching its nuke, it still remains operational and keeps transmitting the false data to NORAD. As it turns out, it's actually the mammal pod that needs to be destroyed, which might be a bit too much for Snake to handle.
The inner barrier protecting the mammal pod is designed to be as strong as a bomb shelter.
What's it gonna take to get through?
I guess an atomic bomb would do it.
You trying to be funny?
No! I'm telling you, that armor was designed to withstand a nuclear war.
Oh, what an appallingly ironic outcome! It's not ironic, it's just coincidental.
Huey does have a potential solution though. Drown the beast. Apparently, Peace Walker and the mammal pod have sustained enough damage that the pressure from being submerged in the nearby lake should crack it open and flood its delicate insides. Unfortunately, it is quite a hefty machine, so it's not like Snake could just push it himself. He could definitely call in some of the many helicopters, tanks and or other such vehicles now under his command and have them easily drag or push the thing into the waters though, but I guess that just wouldn't be dramatic enough. To make matters even worse though, NORAD seem to be on the verge of retaliating as none of them want to do so, but they agree that they have no other choice. In complete desperation, Snake has Huey patch him through to them as he does his best to explain the situation and convince them not to launch. While some are hesitant to believe him, the chairman eventually does and is even about to call off the strike when he suddenly has a gun shoved in his face and is forced to go through with it after all. Before anyone can come up with any other bright ideas though, the mammal pod suddenly calls out Snake's name and opens up of its own accord as if beckoning him to enter. How? Why?
You ask a lot of questions.
Snake doesn't waste any time trying to figure this out though, as he rushes inside the pod and takes out all of its data boards. While this should have stopped Peace Walker once and for all though, it seems it somehow manages to shift control to its so-called reptile pod, meaning it is still operational and sending the false data. This shouldn't really be possible, but trust me when I say you haven't seen anything yet. Either way, the only option left is for Snake to try and get Peace Walker into the lake and drown it, but as he seemingly still refuses to even contemplate sending in the choppers, there's simply no possible way for him to make that happen. Just as time is about to run out though, Peace Walker suddenly has some sort of seizure and starts singing. No really, it literally starts singing.
What's going on?
That song.
Boss, is that you?
She's drowning herself to stop the transmission.
Yup, Peace Walker actually decides to kill itself because it carries the will of the boss. Did you want people to hate this game? fine, I suppose it could be worse, maybe, but this is still pretty damn stupid. I mean, if Peace Walker is just going to destroy itself in the end anyway, then what exactly was the point of Snake going through all of this in the first place? It just makes the entire game feel utterly pointless, as the only thing that could actually stop Peace Walker is apparently Peace Walker itself. Either way, Peace Walker is finally destroyed, going out with a song and a literal sign of peace. Things don't quite end there though, as we may be treated to some end credits, but we're also informed that there's still one more chapter to complete. That's right, even though we just saw an ending, that apparently wasn't the ending. There is in fact another, truer ending that is only accessible by going through a few more missions and completing a few more tasks. Not that the game ever properly explains exactly what these tasks actually are. Don't get me wrong, it's not like you can't figure out anything in this final chapter, but the requirements for actually reaching and unlocking the final mission are so convoluted, confusing and obscure that you're all but required to consult a guide. In any case, this final chapter is in essence all about gathering parts to build your very own Metal Gear, codenamed Zeke. This is done by battling the various AI weapons made by Huey and basically getting lucky. At least that's as much as I can figure out, as absolutely no one seems to know how this actually works. I'm so not kidding. If you try to look up a guide on how gathering these AI parts actually work, you will find about as many different answers as there are posts trying to figure it out. Some say you need to damage certain parts of the AI machines without actually destroying them, some say you need to only hit the so-called AI pods, and some say you need to destroy everything but the part you're after. While some will claim a certain tactic definitely works, others will rebut with tales of spending hours using them without any results, so your guess really is as good as mine with this one. Thankfully, there are a few other things to do in this chapter though. There are still quite a few extra ops, for example, some of which are rather interesting or fun, but most of them are far from necessary and they don't really help further things along. That honor is still reserved for the main ops, which in this chapter consists of doing the exact same thing multiple times. Finding and recapturing an escaped Sodornov. Yep, story-wise, this entire chapter consists of nothing more than hunting down and recapturing Sodornov, something that honestly gets absolutely farcical. You see, he doesn't just slip away once or twice, he somehow manages to escape not 3, not 5, but 7 times. 7!
7?
7! Have you lost your dumb little minds? Yeah, I know, this is just an added extra chapter, and it's not supposed to be taken all that seriously, but with all due respect, that's utter horse poo and you know it. Not only is this added chapter obviously meant to be an all but integral part of the story, especially considering what it ultimately leads to, but there isn't a single, solitary, even half-decent excuse for pulling something this boneheaded. It makes the game repetitive and annoying, it makes Snake, Kaz and the rest of MSF seem like a bunch of incompetent morons, and any potential humor completely evaporates around the 3rd time this happens. Hell, even Snake eventually gets completely fed up with this.
Snake, listen! Zadornov's done it again!
Come on!
Even if you disregard how truly ridiculous this all is though, this final chapter is still just a chore to play, and your progression could literally halt before the final mission. After all, it's not enough to just gather the Metal Gear parts and do these missions as they appear, you also have to go through quite a few steps you're never once informed about. You see, in addition to completing your Metal Gear and all the Sodornov missions, you also need to level up your teams and base to a certain undisclosed level. Fair enough, you'll more than likely accomplish that by the time you reach this point, but it still would have been nice to get at least a tiny hint that it was a requirement. Besides, the final mission still won't unlock until you complete one more step you're simply just supposed to know about. You see, just as Zeke is finally finished and fitted with the nuke recovered from Peace Walker, Sodornov seems to disappear completely, as Kaz can't even find any clues to his whereabouts this time. He hasn't really gone all that far though, as you're somehow just supposed to figure out that you need to go to the mother base firing range. If you do, you should hear Sodornov laughing, as he can actually be found near the staircase on the 2nd floor. I know, so obvious, isn't it? As it happens though, Sodornov was seemingly waiting to be found, as he actually tries to shoot Snake, only to end up shot himself. Before also firing his apparently rocket-propelled artificial hand at Snake, because of course they wouldn't have taken that away from him at this point, Sodornov reveals that he was merely a distraction all along, as Kaz contacts Snake to warn him that Zeke has been activated and is preparing to attack. After rushing to the helipads of Mother Base, Snake discovers that Paz is far from some innocent little girl, as she's the one controlling Zeke. It seems she is actually a spy working for a secret organization called Cypher, who turns out to be led by none other than Snake's old commander, Major Zero. As he apparently plans to use AIs and superior technology to somehow take over and control the world in the encroaching digital age, Zero had Paz keep an eye on the development of both Peace Walker and Zeke in order to take control of them when and if the time was right. Where do I even begin with this one? Fair enough, you don't exactly see this twist coming, but it feels so forced out of place and like it comes out of absolutely nowhere that you might as well just have a bunch of aliens suddenly show up. Seriously, when the hell was there ever even the slightest, teeniest, most minute indication that Paz could possibly be hiding something, or that Major Zero was at all involved in anything? Never! That's when! Also, why exactly was I busting my ass gathering all those parts to build an AI machine when the thing actually turns out to be manually operated in the end anyway? What was the point of any of this? In any case, with the completion of Zeke, Paz can now put Cypher's plan into action as she apparently intends to fire its nuke from Mother Base. This should effectively turn MSF into the most hated and targeted terrorist organization in the world and allow Cypher to complete their plans unhindered. Paz does, however, pass along an ultimatum from Zero. If Snake agrees to join him and serve as Cypher's symbolic but enigmatic and inspiring leader, he can keep MSF and Zeke, otherwise he'll be eliminated. After he obviously rejects this offer, Snake faces off against Zeke and Paz and eventually manages to bring them both down, meaning MSF retains their freedom for now. Snake still fears that they will end up being hunted though, not only by Cypher, but by anyone who views their nuclear capabilities as a threat. He therefore has Kaz assemble the troops as he ends the game by giving them and us a stirring speech.
We will be the deterrent for those with no other recourse. We are soldiers without borders, our purpose defined by the era we live in. If the times demand it, we'll be revolutionaries, criminals, terrorists. And yes, we may all be headed straight to hell. But what better place for us than this? This is utter heaven.
This is Sparta!
Wow, is this game a mess. The gameplay is broken and dull, the characters are inconsequential morons, the plot has more holes than Swiss cheese, and the storytelling is literally in pieces. It's also even more verbose and pretentious than usual, even though the stuff being spouted is probably some of the shallowest and most meaningless guff in the entire series. I really am struggling to come up with many positives for this one. Okay, so the visuals are pretty nice, the improved recruiting and team management mechanics are a nice touch, and there are some rather neat moments or side missions once in a while, but that's pretty much all I can come up with. It also doesn't really matter how much they may or may not have improved certain mechanics when most of your time is just spent fiddling around a bunch of boring menus anyway. Sure, I've disliked and had my fair share of problems with other entries in this franchise, but to me, this was where it went right down the toilet. This is where it completely died. No other Metal Gear game feels like this much of a painful, boring chore to play, and when you even manage to remove any semblance of stealth from what is supposed to be a stealth game, well,
you done fucked it up!
Still, it's not like this is the final entry in the series, so I suppose there's at least a little hope left. After all, it's not like the next entry could possibly get any more ludicrous or take away any more dignity from this franchise or its characters, right?
You gotta be fucking kidding.